the thrilling conclusion of Profiles in Courage and Cowardice, an in-depth INS report on the president and all the shit they've been up to, Part 2.
Welcome to INS, the International News Service, your source for the most important weird news from across the globe. With news analyst Kevin Harrison, actor, comedian, and musician Mike Wiebe, and professional commentator Brian Camp. INS, the news you need.
So, Mike, I believe you have a story for us.
This isn't presidential, but it is important. So, as we know, we are at the beginning of the Bellisariosance. We're covering the works of Donald P Bellisario, creator of such shows as Airwolf, Magnum PI, and many others. But
you might say he was the president of TV in the 80s.
Yeah, and he ruled with a strong hand and took many mistress lovers and some misters. So I actually, when I started looking at stuff for this, I wanted to just cover Jan Michael Vincent's career, and I got into that. But I found something much more fascinating that I kind of want to get into. I'm going to have to share some video and audio with y'all. Do you know who Jan Michael Vincent is, Eric?
Yes. And it was like an 80s act.
Yeah, he was just a surfer, handsome surfer dude from a family full of bank robbers. He was like the first person in his family, or the first generation in his family, not to be career criminals, and which is pretty cool. His grandfather was a bank robber and counterfeiter, and his uncle was shot to death by a sheriff for a robbery in Oregon, and two of his other uncles were convicted of bank robbery in California, and another family member was arrested in Hanford for bank robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. You know, he was this handsome surfer dude, moved out to California, surfing around. One of those classic stories of he was just walking down the beach with his shirt off, and some guy goes, "Hey man, you're hot. You want to be in the movies?" Because that kind of thing can happen in California. So he started doing a bunch of TV and stuff like that, getting acting work.
Is this going to be about Danger Island?
Can I do my fucking story?
Go ahead, please.
God, skip to the part where the producer put his fingers inside him.
Oh, yeah.
That's the part I want. That's the part I want.
Well, he was on this great show called Danger Island, which was a serialized tale about sort of an older version of Johnny Quest. It was a captain and Jan Michael Vincent and a girl who was always in trouble, and a fairly racist portrayal of a native named Chongo, who
now we're talking,
was a bit more monkey than man, and would occasionally jump around, and people would shout, "Uh-oh, Chongo," was his catchphrase. And there was lots of headhunting natives, but it was a serialized live action thing that took place when his little crew gets shipwrecked on this island. They're fighting pirates and natives and snakes and tigers and Chongo and everything else. And it was on this show called Banana Splits, which was 5 lovable, I don't know, Disney-esque mascots that would bump into each other and fall about. And it was just a series of cartoon stuff. So he does that.
Wait, hold on. I got to interrupt for 1 second. So that when in the intro to the Banana Splits, when they show they're in the amusement park, that amusement park is Kings Island in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Why did they shoot that? No, and you just laughed like Flegel, which is really weird.
Anyway.
So then he's in John Milius's. This movie is so fucking good. I can't recommend it. It's called Big Wednesday, and it's kind of like a sad, meaner version of American Graffiti.
Okay,
it's Jan Michael Vincent and William Catt, who would later go on to be the greatest American hero, and Gary Busey. And they're all buddies who are surfers. And then it just kind of follows them over the years. It kind of takes these 2 to 5 year breaks of them going to Vietnam and coming back. And they start off as young friends and they change over time. And then later he starts getting more movie work. And he's in a movie called The Mechanic with Charlie Bronson. That is the most insanely, apparently Jan Michael Vincent didn't recognize it and Charlie Bronson didn't recognize it, but it is an overt statement about homosexuality, and it's about the two of them. What the movie's about is Charles Bronson's a hitman, and he takes on Jan Michael Vincent as his young ward, and they have this very strong bond, and then ultimately are trying to kill each other. And the script was originally written as they were very out homosexuals, but then somebody was like, "Hey, we'll make it. Just take out that they're gay."
But they left in all the stuff.
Yeah,
they left in all the stuff they've been doing.
They filmed the whole movie, and people were like, "Hey, what? This movie's about them being gay." And Bronson and Jan Michael Vincent were just they'd never and there are so many scenes that the dialogue is so clear where they're just like, "Yeah, it's tough to be inside your, inside your mind. Yeah, now I'm inside yours. Now we're inside each other."
They didn't understand from the making out scene.
They don't do that, Kevin. Charles Bronson, he's never kissed a man. He doesn't even. Charles Bronson is so masculine, he doesn't even kiss women. But Jan Michael Vincent starts to kind of fall on some hard times. With the success, there's a dark side. Ooh. Oh, and I also have to mention there's a movie I watched a million times as a kid, a Disney movie called The World's Greatest Athlete. He's like a Tarzan, and Tim Conway finds him out in the jungle and then brings him to the States, and he's just the world's greatest asset.
Was that Jan Michael Vincent?
Yeah. Okay. That's why I brought it up.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Yes.
If I don't want to preempt the story, but I realize we live in an age now where the small screen and the silver screen might be switching roles in precedence in American viewership. But this seems to be a time when once you were on the big screen, you were a film actor and you didn't do TV. And we know from last week that Jan eventually makes his way to Airwolf. What's going on? What led to, because Charles Bronson's a star, right?
I'll tell you, Brian.
Okay.
Charles Bronson was the star, and Jan Michael didn't have a ton of leading man movies, but that seemingly backtrack of a move wasn't quite a backtrack, because when he got to be on Airwolf, he was the highest paid television actor in the entire in the world at that time. Shit. He was getting $200,000 an episode.
So it's 22 episodes a year.
I don't know how many episodes a year. Okay. I would guess that they definitely were doing those large numbers. But his personal life was very torn up. He got married in '68 and had a daughter, but then they got divorced. Then his second wife, Joanne Robinson, left him and entered a restraining order against him in 1998, alleging that he had abused her during their marriage. They actually, that doesn't mention it here, but he slapped her around when she was pregnant, causing her to have a miscarriage. That's what she says. He battled alcoholism and intravenous drug use for most of his life. Lots of cocaine, tons of cocaine. He was arrested for cocaine in 1977, 1978, and 1979. He got arrested one time for having 6 pounds of marijuana in his car, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later.
Okay.
He's in felony stuff all the time. He keeps getting in car wrecks and motorcycle wrecks because he's just constantly drunk driving. And in '97, he gets in a car wreck, and it fuses they have to fuse his vertebrae together. And during the medical procedure, they had to trach him because he was like dying. So they had to do like the on the scene kind of trach, and he suffered permanent injury to his vocal cords. So like when you see him in Buffalo 66, he's kind of talking like this, but just really drinking and fucking up his career. Because like the last season of Airwolf, like one of the reasons like he didn't come back was because he's still a star, but like he was impossible to work with. Like he just couldn't get through a scene. He was just wasted all the time. So in doing research I was just going to keep going about Jan Michael Vincent, and I did, but now I found a new favorite thing that I want to examine more and more, and that's how fucked up daytime talk shows treated people back then. Because I have queued up this episode of Geraldo, and some of the back and forth that they talk to a very clearly fucked up Jan Michael Vincent. So I'll set up the scene for this Geraldo. It's just the Hollywood gossip episode of Geraldo. So they've got a girl who used to date Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. Okay. They've got Jan Michael Vincent, and then they just have like 3 gossip hounds. And there's several portions of the thing where they're just talking about, oh, Tom Cruise was seen here with this person, and oh, this person's having marital troubles, we hear. And I thought that TMZ was the trashiest, but this is clearly worse. But they've got poor Jan Michael Vincent there at the end, and some of the questions he gets asked are exquisite. So I would like to share for you guys now. Yeah, sunglasses on the whole time.
He's been in the spotlight. He knows how that works. On the other hand, I think he would admit that over the years he's had a lot of very tremendous press too. And I think what he just said to us is that he's an addictive personality. This man's suffering from a disease. I mean, it's not something he did because he's a star or because he's...
We spoke to Lisa, who you claim now not to really be in love with. Lisa told us that she's afraid that you're going to kill yourself.
I don't think so.
I mean, not intentionally, just by...
No, I think Lisa's a little sketchy.
Are you in therapy? Are you seeing anybody?
I've been in therapy.
I mean, are you currently in therapy?
Why would I be in therapy? I'm not doing anything.
Are you drinking? I mean, are you clean right now?
Yeah.
100% sober? 100%. If you could say to your wife, win her back, is there anything you could say to her on national television to win her back?
I'd die to have her back.
You want to make a plea to her right here?
Joanne?
I mean, nah.
17 years. I know I've done wrong things, and I'd lay down anything to have you back.
God.
Anything. Wow.
Now, watch when they come back here what's going on.
Okay.
After that statement.
Jan Michael Vincent, Kansas star. Tommy Lee's first wife. Oh, Jan is putting the moves on Candace there.
I think basically it is. She didn't lie about anything.
Yeah, you got to get the question.
He's
Here we go.
and stuff. You can be yourself with him. He's a great lover.
Tommy Lee.
He must be. He's got to be. He's got to be.
You still have an affair with him today, even though he's married to Pamela Anderson.
I think I'm pretty much over it after the last one.
Your question?
No.
Right, yes.
This is for Jan. If you didn't beat your wife, why would she come out and say that you did? Why would she lie about something like that?
You know what I think basically it is? She didn't lie about anything. I didn't beat her. Not physically. Because if I hit a woman, basically, probably finish. But I have a filthy mouth, and I cuss, and I I don't know why. I used to be really shy, and I come back and I swear and I cuss and I'm verbally abusive, and that's the truth about that matter.
You know, Jan, we have
better, sir.
This is something we've never done before. We have an aftercare program. We do a lot of programs.
I like that.
About
if I hit
people
my
who
wife,
have some
she'd
kind
know
of thing wrong in their life, and we offer them free of any charge to them access to some of the best facilities in the whole country. We would be honored if you'd let us sponsor you someplace.
Sponsor me where?
I don't know.
Do you know why he was on the show?
Do you want to go to like a Betty Ford or a Meadows or a Fair Oaks?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Really?
I don't need to.
I love him.
I love him.
You promise?
Geraldi, what I'm going to do is go sailing and see you out at Yellowbanks.
Okay, buddy. Okay. That's our old days in Malibu, California, USA. We'll be right back.
Yeah, I just really loved seeing just the just strangers asking him questions about being his wife and him, and that's my favorite response. If I were to hit a woman, I would finish her.
He desperately needed an attorney to put a hand on his shoulder and say, "No, not answering that one, buddy."
Yes.
I don't, and it's weird. Like, and they're not quite as insane, but some of the other people that they're talking to there, and I started to go down a Geraldo hole, and Jesus Christ, that
Geraldo
show
hole.
was so fucking trashy.
Yeah, all those
it
shows.
is crazy. So
Yeah.
I definitely we'll be hearing more from Geraldo
Ooh.
in our newfound Bellisariosance.
Is that
Kevin.
the era of
Ooh.
Mike? I have to ask you a question now. Is that the era of Geraldo that saw him get beat up by a Nazi, like a skinhead? Didn't he have like skinheads on his show all
I
the
don't
time?
remember what year that is.
That
We're
was
going to find
Geraldo.
out a lot more about
I'm looking forward to
Juan
it.
Julio
Yeah.
Geraldo.
What was the name of that one dude? Martin, was his name Martin Downey or something like that?
Morton Downey.
Morton
Oh,
Downey.
with the big mouth
Downey Jr.
logo on the podiums.
Yeah.
Was he 80s?
Yeah.
He was more 80s, right?
Yeah, he was more 80s.
UHF channel, right?
Him and then Donahue, and then all the other people came in like after them, right?
Well, no, so we were talking about this right before we recorded. Joe Pine, Pyne, was really the first guy to just, I want every interaction on my show to be confrontational, and he would throw desks and tables and shit. And that started in the 60s.
Oh,
But he was still going, like, I remember him getting picked up when I lived in Columbus in like the mid 80s, and they were advertising him on TV. What would you say was the pinnacle of Jan Michael Vincent's career then? It seems like there must have been a peak. Like the peak must have been, was it Airwolf, like the first season?
Airwolf, yeah, that's where he had
Okay.
like all the
Given
money.
Ernest Borgnine a blowjob.
Yeah, and I think the peak was when his pinnacle was when he hit his wife.
Oh,
No, he didn't do that, Mike.
Yeah, he
If
would
he
have
had
finished her.
Yeah,
If
He
he,
would've
had hit
finished
a
her.
woman. That's right.
that would be a good moment for his wife to be like, "He never finished me either." You know, that would have been a good.
this was clearly the first moment, the first case of cancel culture ever.
I don't think he got canceled so much as he just didn't have a career anymore. Like before that, before 1995.
No, it's because people started spreading rumors about him doing cocaine.
Well, I mean, he did get arrested 3 years in a row for cocaine possession.
Oh, I forgot. I forgot that after the trach accident, he got to another accident and he got his leg amputated.
Oh,
So the
I remember
last
that.
several years of his life, his leg was amputated.
That wasn't done because of alcoholism.
No, it was an accident.
You still fly a helicopter with just one leg?
Well, Airwolf is it's what we basically call a smart vehicle.
Oh,
So there's an AI, which stands for artificial intelligence, that's inside Airwolf that's kind of running it and keeping it all together. And what happens is it links with Stringfellow Hawk's mind. And he's really able to fly it. You don't really use a lot of feet pedals in helicopters.
so if it had in quote AI, as you say, it was like Kit on Knight Rider.
Not familiar.
Do you
The show
think,
you've covered in the past.
do you think that Jan Michael's issues with drug abuse and eventual spousal abuse, allegedly, and getting a leg amputated, do you think that was related to his difficulty in confronting the fact that his brother was missing in action in Vietnam?
I think, I do know that Jan Michael went so deep into character that Stringfellow Hawk's MIA brother profoundly affected him And then on the show, because he's so method, when they found his brother and started working together, that really fucked him up. That really twisted him all around. And he
I forgot they found his brother.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And that's when he started doing cocaine and driving too fast. You
think Ernest Borgnine did a lot of coke?
I think Ernest Borgnine was more of a Vicodin guy, just snorting and chewing up Vicodin, which would explain some of the excess weight because you become very constipated on Vicodin.
Oh, so he is mostly poop?
A large percentage of impacted fecal matter.
Wow.
What percentage of his body was made of feces?
I'm going to say about 64%.
That sounds right.
He overcame that and won an Oscar.
I have a president question. So we were talking a little bit about rampant drug use, and we talked before about FDR being compared to Hitler, and we know from some of Mike's research before that Hitler had a fondness for meth, I think it was, and a whole lot of it. Are there not like in modern, not just drugs for pleasure era, but in the era of there's this new miracle thing called meth. This new miracle thing, like just if you don't feel good, take some laudanum. Is there a particular president who that it's at least theorized had a very, very strong fondness for?
Yeah, I'm trying to go through in my head, and I feel like I would have definitely remembered.
I feel like that would be Kennedy, wouldn't it? I thought Kennedy did a lot of speed.
Well, I mean, Kennedy. No, the thing was Kennedy, and I don't know the names of the drug, but for his Addison's disease, he got injections like directly into his spine sometimes because like it could get really bad. So he did. I mean, actually, that's the reason he looks so tanned is because his medicine gave him like a yellowish, like that kind of hepatitis skin, and so he got tanned to cover that up, so he wouldn't look sickly.
Wow. Was he so was he pretty frail? Was he weak?
Yeah, I mean his condition was pretty bad. Like, and there could be times when he was like, laid out.
Was that from his service or was that something else?
I was trying to remember how he initially got it. I think he got it because like when he was in the war, like his PT boat got shut up and he had to like they had to like swim out to an island. One of the dudes, he like actually took his like life vest and put it in his teeth and swam all the way out there. Like, I mean, it was so I mean, he had some like legit like hero credentials because of that. But like, yeah, I mean, I think they got kind of messed up over there. But I don't want to say for sure that I know that's where he got the Addison's disease from. But I think
why do you think it was that Kennedy's father's connection to bootlegging didn't? When I was in public school, they always talked about Kennedy and the fact that he was young and the fact that he was Catholic, like were the things that he had to overcome to win the presidency. But why wasn't it the fact that he was the son of a notorious Prohibition era bootlegger? Or did people just not know that? Was it not widely known? Or
that's a good question. Like how widely? I mean, I feel like it probably might have been. I mean, but his dad was also like, I mean, he was FDR's ambassador to London.
Really?
So it's like so by the time that you get to like the 30s, he's legit. Like he's like the Michael Corleone that's going legit. So that stuff is kind of forgotten by then. And the Kennedys are just like a dynasty.
I feel like when we were growing up, like Kennedy was on such a pedestal that you just wouldn't say something like that.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too. Like even with his affairs, that was an era where reporters kind of understood to keep that stuff under wraps. Like they kept his Addison's disease under wrap, or that was like, I guess that was like maybe the first time some people were talking about it. But like his affairs were kept under wraps. So I feel like all that stuff about Joseph Kennedy being a bootlegger is like later when like in the 80s and 90s when it's like fun to talk about scandals. That's when you start seeing all these because there's like, I feel like most of the Kennedy stuff is that 90s, like when Oliver Stone's movie comes out, like you start seeing like tons of like JFK expose documentaries on TV.
Yeah, that's true.
Like a lot of the dudes that like are the characters in The Irishman, like were selling books, like not just Frank Sheeran, but like the Frank Regano, the guy that Ray Romano played in the movie. He had like a episode on Frontline where he's like, and it's all BS too, but they're just talking about like, yeah, I know what happened.
So I got two questions for you, Eric, because you bring up a good point. Who really killed JFK and who really killed Lincoln?
Wait, am I supposed to answer this legitimately? I mean, yeah, like, I got like super into the Kennedy assassination because like I'm a very anti-conspiracy guy. And it was the first conspiracy that I actually felt like might have had some legs. So I took like just such a deep dive when the 50th anniversary Like me and a buddy were like, let's solve it. Let's fucking solve it. And as more we got into it, more like, it's obviously Oswald did it. Like very obviously.
Were you walking through Dealey Plaza, drawing X's where the bullets were found, and like
I was even like so there were two committees. There was the Warren Commission, which actually did a very good job, and then there's the House Committee on Assassinations, which, funny enough, they were able to find no evidence of a conspiracy, but their conclusion was still, we think there was probably a conspiracy, but we couldn't find any evidence of it. It's like, you can't just do that.
They do shit like that. They still do shit like that.
But one of the things they used was
my mom does stuff like that.
Yeah, well, now it sounds quaint for me to say something like that in this environment. But they had like a hot mic on one of the cops who was on the motorcycle, and supposedly it picked up the second shot from like the grassy knoll. And so I actually found, because like this is the magic of the internet, all that stuff is like out there. Somebody's like collecting it. And so like I could listen to the audio that they used, and it was like so funny because I listened to it and I listened through like 4 minutes of this clip. And there's nothing there. Like it's just static. And it's like, and then you look in the comments and everybody's like, yep, right there it is right there at 108. And then the next one's like, yep, right there at 217. I heard it. The next one's like, yep, 338. There it is. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, this is bullshit.
Now, have you ever heard, this is related to that, which is, have you ever heard the recordings of LBJ, the president after JFK?
The phone calls?
Yeah, the phone calls of him to his tailor, where he's talking about how his pants are too high and they cut into his balls and where in his bunghole. Yeah,
because he has a giant dick. Which he nicknamed Jumbo, and me and Mike have talked about. He would like whip it out at functions,
right?
Just for kicks. Another thing he would definitely
get canceled. Is that why Mike started doing that?
Yes, he was inspired. He was inspired by.
Well, yeah, it was an homage. It's an homage. It's not ripping it off. It's an homage.
Yeah, that's what you.
And it never gets quite that reaction. Well, the JFK thing, I was pretty interested in it for a while too. And I've taken the tour and all that. And there's not a lot up there. Definitely like standing up there and thinking about a topless car going fairly slow. It seems like a sharpshooter could hit that.
Yeah.
And going through there wasn't a lot, except for there was one plaque. And I don't know all these people's age, but do you remember that? Because you've walked the Dealey plot, you've watched the book's Suppository, right?
Yes.
Depository.
There's like one.
It is a depository.
No. You don't leave the books. You put them up in there. You put the books up in there. But there's this plaque, and it lists. I don't remember the exact number, but it's got to be like 25 to 30 people that all died that were like kind of directly related to stuff, and that they all died within like a year of this. And there's just tons of people, and I don't know, it doesn't list their ages when they die. Do you know what I'm talking about at all?
I didn't see that flag. Is that one but set up by the fans that are hanging out there?
No, it's set up. It's just a thing in like when you get to turn a corner where it's like, this is what happened. And there's a little area that's like the conspiracy area where it acknowledges like, hey, there's a lot of people that have conspiracies. We don't really think it's real, but here's some stuff that people say. And that's like one thing that strikes me as like incredibly.
Yeah, if it's true. That's the problem. Is what I've realized when I talk to conspiracy people is they'll tell me something like, okay, well that is striking. And then what I do is I'll then go look at it myself and I'll be like, wait, everything you told me is not true. And so like, that's the problem, is you got to find out if they are just living off of conspiracy information rather than real information.
Right.
Because like, I would notice that like, that I know a ton of stuff about 9/11. So if I'm talking about 9/11, like I don't like just shit on them. I'll like actually have the conversation with them, but they'll ask me stuff like, then they'll be like, but what about the thermite? How do you feel about the thermite that was planted? And I was like, I've never heard that, which leads me to believe it's not true, because you're getting your information from this place over here that says thermite was definitely planted. I'm getting my information from the people that like investigated and seen and never found any kind of thermite.
Right.
It's like we can't really like it almost gets to a point where it's like, oh, we're not going to be able to have a conversation because you're operating off an information base that comes from a world I don't even live in.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's intentional. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
Well, it's this guy, Jim Mars, wrote a book called Crossfire, and it's people who have deaths of witnesses connected to the assassination of JFK.
And I probably, because there were so many different theories. I went with the ones that were like the more intriguing ones, like, the magic bullet theory and stuff. And of course, they didn't have the positions of the people right. And also just like, I was more interested in the stuff that to me sounded like legitimate kind of criticism. Some of the conspiracies get wild. Like the whole thing about like Oswald, well, he would have had to get all shots off in 5 seconds. And it's not. It's 5 seconds between shots. It was 11 seconds. And so it's like, and that's a lot of time.
Especially in that moment. Once you shoot that first shot, like 5 seconds is an eternity.
Yeah. And like in the thing with the grassy knoll is, it's true. There were some witnesses that felt they heard a shot from the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
But it's like that could also be echo. And it's like when there's a situation where you have like hundreds of witnesses and like 85% of them say they heard 3 shots from the book depository. 10% of them say they might have heard a second shot from the grassy knoll, and 5% of them say they heard from like 1 to 14 shots from 14 different directions. You go with the 85%.
Yeah.
Well, I would want to collect all this, but just going through this, there's definitely some weird things. This guy that knew Jack Ruby and visited him in jail, and then at the next year in 1964, somebody breaks into his house and kills him by a karate chop to the throat.
See, already I'm suspicious when it's like a karate chop to the throat. Like that's.
There's a bunch of like.
You wouldn't be suspicious if it happened to you.
And I know that Jack Ruby kept complaining because he thought he was going to get heralded as a hero for being the guy who shot the son of a bitch that shot Kennedy, and then he's like, "God damn it! Everybody thinks I'm in on it now."
Yeah.
That's such like a Texas thing too. I'm going to take this into my own hands and everybody will thank me.
And also that's like, and speaking of going through past assassination, that's all very common. Like when they got John Wilkes Booth, Boston Corbett, I think his name was, just like randomly pulled out his gun and shot him against orders. And like when the assassins for McKinley and Garfield, there were several moments where people were caught, with guns trying to take a shot at them. Or I think one time they took a shot at Leon Kolgish while he was in prison. So it's like this idea of assassinating the assassin is very common.
The one I like is the guy who tried to assassinate Teddy Roosevelt. So he beat the shit out of the guy.
Oh, yeah.
He got shot, beat the shit out of the guy, and then gave like a 2-hour speech, right?
I think actually you're mentioning with the Andrew Jackson too. Jackson had a guy pull a gun on him and it misfired, and then he beat the shit out of the guy. And then Teddy Roosevelt, I don't think he beat the shit out of him, but he did get shot and then gave an hour speech. And then like at the end of the speech was like, all right, I got to go to the hospital now because I've got a bullet over here. And everyone's like, wait, is he serious?
Yeah, the way, this is probably from internet lore, but I read that he had to be pulled off the guy so he could go give a speech. But
I wouldn't doubt that. I feel like I know that Jackson beat up a guy that tried to because Jackson was also a badass.
Right.
But I could see Teddy Roosevelt doing it too. Teddy was so he's just so crazy. Like he's crazy in such a fun way. Yeah, the stories of him going to Deadwood, like he was friends with Seth Bullock, the character from Deadwood, the real life character.
Right.
And like when he went west, he was just like a rich kid from Oyster Bay, and he just he had like an Western outfit that he made himself that looked like silly, and so like he showed up and he just looked like a dandy rich guy, and everybody was making fun of him. But like the more he was out there, the more people started to realize like this guy's actually a badass. Like he's tough. And he just would do crazy shit like that and somehow make it work.
Now, Squeaky Frome's attempt.
Yeah, she was the one who shot Gerald
Ford, right?
Right, Ford, because he got shot
real close too, right?
Yeah, he got shot at like twice in really quick succession too.
Like I think her gun jammed.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because, like I said, there were 2 at the same time, and she was one of them.
Mike, remind us what Squeaky Frome means.
Squeaky Frome is a term for when you have completely cleaned your butthole, and then your asshole is your frome is squeaky clean.
Your frome.
So it's like it's an asshole that you could literally eat off of.
Shout out to Philip Pampers for illustrating that for us.
The great Philip Pampers.
And I will ask this: in the assassination of Garfield, was Odie ever
Normal was devastated, I think.
Well, I do know that one Garfield
Actually,
Garfield
tell me about those, because the other 2, Lincoln and Kennedy, I'm very aware of, but I would like to know about the other 2 assassinations.
Well, I know when Garfield was shot, like while he was laying on the ground, he said, "Ugh, Mondays."
started vomiting lasagna.
He was well regarded though, right?
He was cool. I mean, he was like just at the start of, but he was like a genius, like a literal genius. Like he invented a theorem, like what they called a proof for the Pythagorean theorem, like on his own. He was like ambidextrous. He could like write in Greek and Latin or something like at the same time with two hands. Yeah, he was like, I mean, like a lot of those guys, he was a general in the Civil War for the Union. But he was like really, he was a really smart guy. And I kind of wish I could have seen like what else he would have done. But yeah, he got shot.
How did he get clipped and why?
He got clipped in I believe it was in a train station. Guy shot him in the back. I think he got shot like kind of like at the bottom base of his back. And he was a disgruntled guy. This was like, okay, one of the big issues of the era. I'll try not to get too boring, but it was civil service jobs where like patronage was the big thing back then. Where like, hey, I get elected, I take care of my friends. You know, you help me, I'll get you guys a job here, and I'll get your cousin a job over here. And so there was this big push for civil service reform so that people would have to like get tested and it would be merit based. And so this guy was, I mean, really, he was just a loon, but because he had been turned down for civil service jobs, that was like his stated grievance. And so the funny thing is, after he did that, it became this event that people used to push for civil service reform, even though this guy was not like a qualified guy who had been kicked out of a job. He was just a lunatic who was mad that he wasn't given a job.
Right. That was the guy who lived with like a hippie love cult and yet couldn't get laid, right?
I don't know that much about him. I don't remember. I mean,
is that Charles Guiteau? Is that right?
Yes, that's his name. I was going to say he's the one I always forget. Leon Kolgish is the one who shot McKinley.
He lived with a hippie love cult for a while, and he couldn't get laid, and they called him Charles Get Out.
The first incel. And that actually sounds right. From what I remember reading about him, he sounds more like a kind of like incel guy who like feigned that this was all about civil service reform. But like Garfield, like he died like a really slow, painful death because they just didn't know what they were doing with him. Like I said, they were like digging in his wound with their bare fingers. And my favorite was when they used like, I think this was like the first draft of a metal detector,
right?
And they couldn't find the bullet, and so they were going to use that on him, but they had forgotten that he was laying on like a wired mesh mattress. So they just, so like the whole time they were just like, it's not working. And they were like digging in him every time they got a buzz and just like putting him through all this pain. And they're just like, this fucking thing's broken. But if they had like thought about it, they might have been able to get the bullet.
Would a metal detector even pick up lead?
I don't know. I
thought it was I thought it reacted to it being magnetic.
That's a good question. So maybe it still wouldn't have worked, but I do know that that's like why they were getting so many readings and why they kept just digging in his hole while he screamed in pain. And actually that was the time, like I said, I think what's his name, Lister, who was like the kind of first guy to sort of like say like, hey, you guys need to be like wearing gloves and washing your hands. And he was trying to tell people that, and they were just like, get out of here, you kooky crackpot.
How am I going to eat my sandwich and poke around inside the president?
Yeah, they're just dropping bits of burrito in it, and they're just like, oh, shit.
Get out of here, Fauci.
So were any of these people, how quickly were they just called anarchists? Was that the era where everybody who did anything? No,
that was the next guy. That was the guy who killed McKinley.
Now, was he truly an anarchist, or was that just kind of an umbrella term?
Well, I mean, he was truly an anarchist. The problem is like how organized is the anarchist movement? I mean, the anarchist movement's almost by philosophy not organized. So it's like people who were like prominent anarchists like didn't want to be associated with him. But I mean, he considered himself an anarchist. He had gone to some meetings, but obviously he was a kooky guy. That's the problem. I mean, like if you have a mass movement like that, it's kind of hard to like disavow a guy if he's like reading your pamphlets and trying to go to your meetings. He can say he's one of you, but like you don't even know the guy.
I found that their cookbook was well organized.
Don't make the nitroglycerin, Mike. It'll blow up. Everybody knows. It's the wrong kind of pan.
Great paella.
Listen, they knew what they were doing when I made them go get it behind the counter at Hastings Books and Records.
You've obviously studied a lot. I have two assassination questions. The first is...
Both in 6 parts.
No. Simple questions. The first is it possible that the Kennedy conspiracy, if there is one, is the creation of a conspiracy myth to remove the idea that any person with enough dedication can kill the president? And have you considered how you would kill the president if called upon to do so?
Let's not.
No, I've thought about it.
Who hasn't thought about how they would do it?
I know how I would do it.
Not conspiracy. That's just thinking about something, not planning. There's no real intent.
How would I do it?
Yeah, how would you do it?
Simple. Pole vault and then Chinese star to the neck.
What are you pole vaulting over?
The White House.
The entire White House.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
He pole vaults over the entire White House, then jumps the fence back in and goes and runs into the building.
Wow. Okay, that is pretty sophisticated.
Well, which president? Ask me which president, and I'll tell you how I got him. I would get him.
Millard Fillmore.
I would go to his time and show him a copy of the comic strip Mallard Fillmore, and it would just blow his mind. And he would go, "They're making fun of me," and he would just kill himself.
Yeah, I would use the honey trap, the old honey trap,
the honey pot. Yeah.
That's a good one.
I'd woo him in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I drink a poison that would like be in my semen.
So what I hear, you'd be like in a dress.
Yes,
and you'd be like, okay,
and I'd be like,
you'd be like
and you know, I get
that
him.
always works on Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I would do this current president, but I do know that it would take place at a Luby's. He's old. He's an old guy.
Right.
Loves Luby's.
Right.
Got him.
Eric, do you post anything online? Do you?
I have started substacking because I've been like writing like long, like I'll either do history stuff or politics stuff with my friends, and I decided to just go ahead and start like trying to submit and post this stuff publicly. I usually didn't, just because I'm like a centrist type of guy, and so I just don't like getting yelled at by people. But I was like, F it, I'll start putting stuff out there. So
okay, so where can they find that?
Let's see. I think right now it's under Eric Krug Substack. It's called Print the Legend. I don't know the exact link, but if you Google that, I may have to change the name because some other people use that.
Your name? How do you spell your name?
Oh, it's ERICKRUG.
It's actually pronounced Krug.
Yeah, you're pronouncing it wrong.
Not
correctly.
Incorrect.
Right.
Well, you listen. You're a presidential expert, and I'm a last name expert. So
okay.
Maybe respect each other's fields.
Yeah. All right.
That sounds reasonable to me. Why can't we
You're
just
right.
agree?
I'm the asshole here.
Can't we compromise? Why do you refuse to compromise with Mike?
Yeah.
You're right. I just said I was like a compromiser, and now I'm not. You're right. I'm sorry for being a dick.
You're
Mike.
never going to be a president at this rate,
right.
let alone an assassinated president.
We can actually, you send me the link, and we can put it in our.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do that.
Oh, yeah,
too.
we can actually do that.
And then my comedy album is still up. You can get that on like Spotify and iTunes. And
Okay, what's that called?
it's called Double Speak.
Double Speak.
I was there for the recording, so that's probably a big bonus to some of the fans. If you listen, you can probably hear my laughter within there too. So
give us
it's kind of
give us an example.
You know what? I'm so intimidated by you doing the laugh of Flegel from the Banana Splits that I can't perform.
Hyena-like, as I recall. It's cackling and hyena-like.
So that wraps up another week of the International News Service. Find us across social media at International News Pod. Email us at internationalnewspod@gmail.com. This Thanksgiving, when everyone is in the middle of their 9th football game and their 10th helping of mashed potatoes, why don't you steal their phones and subscribe them to INS? Check out the INS merch store at Redbubble and our Patreon. We'll see you next week.
Fuck Fauci!
Thank you for listening to the International News Service. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. INS, the news you need.